In 1 Corinthians 12, it talks about how every believer has a spiritual gift, how we all have the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, and how we're to edify or how we're to build up the church and our parts in the body. And I want to focus more on our part in the body, because we all have one. It might be small and it might be great, whatever it is. You have a part in the local church and the big church as a whole. We start at verse 12. It says, just whereas the body is one and has many parts, and all the parts of that body, though many, are one body, so also is Christ. Even though we have arms and feet and fingers and toes and eyes and nose, we're still one person. We're still one body, and that's how the church should operate. Not just the local church, but the church in general. It should operate that way, as one body. The physical parts, they do have many of them. Our diversity, though, that's where a lot of people get divided. They get divided on race, they get divided on gender, they get divided on age, they get divided on a lot of stuff. And it makes no sense. Our diversity should actually be the one thing that actually unites us. Because in diversity, that's where you're going to get different thinking, different ways of doing things, different opinions, different viewpoints. It's in diversity that we're actually stronger. Diversity does not mean that you're not united. It just means you're different. And everybody is different, right? If we were all the same, then church would be boring. Life would be boring, because we'd all be doing the same thing, dressing the same way, looking the same way, talking the same is boring. God is the master creator, and He knew what He was doing, so He made us all different and all individuals, right? It's no different in the church. As church, we should be united on our foundations. The foundations are simple. You repent, you believe, and you get baptized, and you're saved, right? Jesus Christ, He came and He died and rose again, and He's coming back, right? Stuff like that is what we should agree on. Everything else is just fluff. Everything else is just interpretation. Everything else is just opinion. You got one church that believes in tongues. You got one church that don't believe in tongues. Focus on what unites you and not what gets you apart from each other, right? Yeah. You got denominations that go to war with each other on theological beliefs. And that's not what Jesus died for. He did not die for our theology. He died for souls. And if you really want to look at it, if your human body only consisted of one part, it would be ugly. You imagine a big old foot walking around? Or a hand walking around, a bit boring and weird. Right? So he wants us to be different. He wants us to have many different parts, but He wants the church to have that too, but still unite under one thing, and that is Jesus. If we can unite under Jesus, then everything else will fall into place. Verse 13 says, for we were all baptized by one Spirit into one body, whether you were Jew or Greek. Whether you were a slave or whether you were free, and we were all given one Spirit to drink. Indeed, the body is not one part but many. If the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I don't belong to the body, it is not for that reason any less a part of the body. Just because you don't think you belong doesn't mean you really don't belong. Because if you come to church, you belong no matter what. No matter what you are, no matter what you believe, if you're coming to church, you're coming into God's house and God's body. Verse 16 says, if the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I don't belong to the body, it is not for that reason any less part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole body was an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But as it is, God arranged each one of the parts in the body just as He wanted. Not how we think it should be, not where we want it to be, but where God put the parts is where they stay. In modern times, we call that staying in your lane. And if we were all the same part, where would the body be? And it is, there are many parts, but one body. The church is one of the most amazing things ever to exist, if you really think about it. Not just because Jesus died and He started the church. It's not just because of that. It's one of the most amazing things because there's so many different people in it. There's so many different races, so many different genders, so many different ideas, so many different beliefs. And in all actuality, church should not work. If you take all of those and put it anywhere else in the world, it's going to be a riot. It is not going to work. You can't put that many different races in one place and not expect something to happen. That many opinions in one place and not expect something to happen. But in church, there's something spiritual takes over. And we put all that aside and we focus on one thing, and that is worshiping God. Church should not work, but because God is in it, it will never fail. Because if God is in something, it can't be destroyed. And they have tried to destroy the church since day one. Ever since the day of Pentecost, they were like, we got to shut this down. Like, we thought we had this taken care of when we crucified Him, but obviously not. We got to shut this down now. Disciples were getting put in prison and getting murdered and getting martyred. Stephen was the first martyr. He preached a pretty blunt message to the Pharisees. And it's like, you bronze-headed, stiff-necked. That's nothing compared to what I've done. I'm pretty easy. But they tried to shut the church down from the very beginning, and one of the best apostles started out killing Christians. He didn't kill them. He okayed it. Paul never murdered anybody, but he consented to all of it. So he was just as guilty as the one that did it. And sometimes when I read when Paul says I had a thorn in the flesh, sometimes I don't think it's a physical thorn. Sometimes I think it's the guilt of what he did to his brothers and sisters. But you have all these different gifts and all this stuff working in the church with a collection of people, and they're gathered together. That's amazing how when it's on, it's just getting people gathered together. Especially now, everybody's so busy. They're going here and they're going there and they're doing this and they're doing that. The kids got this game. All this other stuff going on. It's hard to get people together. Families don't get together anymore. Churches hardly get together outside of Sunday worship. It's rare when you find that, when they go do stuff together on a Thursday. It's hard to get people together because of busy schedules. But once we're gathered, it's special. It's not special because we're together. It's special because of why we're gathered together. It's not for us. It's for Him, right? It's all for God. To give God praise, give God glory, give God honor. Psalm 22 says, I will declare your praise in the sanctuary. I'll tell everybody about you. Everybody I can. I'll tell you about God. We're here to worship Him. Some people get that twisted, though, and they think that church is there for them. And it's not. Church is to glorify God, and if you get your blessing while you're here, then that's just a bonus. Right? But we're all gathered together for one purpose. Besides worshiping God is to change the world. To save souls. To get people out of the flames of hell, right? That's what it should be. But it should not work. The only difference that makes this work with the same group of people, with the same diversity, what makes this work and everything else don't work is the love of God. The love of God is what holds everything together. That's why Jesus said, like, yeah, you know the 10 Commandments, you know all that stuff, but I want you to love one another. That's the greatest commandment. It wasn't nails that held him to the cross. It was the love that he had for us. That's what held him. Love is what holds all of this together. It's what holds us together. It's what holds churches together. It's what holds everything together. If we don't have the love of God, nothing works. You wonder why churches fold and close like crazy nowadays, because there's no love. Verse 21. Says the eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. This is the biggest problem in churches. There's one thing when the hand says, well, because I'm not a foot, I'm not needed. But when the eye says to the hand, I don't need you, that's the problem. Because everybody's needed. Says, I don't need you, verse 22. On the contrary, those parts of the body that are weaker are indispensable. Those are the ones you need the most. You can look at it this way. The usher sometimes is more important than the pastor. The one vacuuming the floors is more important than the pastor. Sometimes the weaker ones, sometimes the less meaningful ones that we see as less meaningful, they're the ones who are going to make the biggest impact. And if you stay faithful in a small thing, God will bless you in a bigger thing. So if you stay faithful in your purpose as an usher, He might take you to another level and you might become a pastor one day. If you show your faithfulness, if you show your dedication to God, He'll elevate you into levels in the Spirit that you don't even think you could ever be at anyway, because you at one point were that hand saying, I don't belong here. But I'm ready to do the work. I'm humble enough to say, I don't belong here, but God's like, oh, you're here. I put you here for a reason. Yeah, you're vacuuming floors. Yeah, you're just taking up offering. Yeah, you're just doing this. Yeah, you're not on stage, but give me a minute. That's the thing about God's minute, is it takes forever for us. I mean, 1,000 years is a day to Him, and a minute, He's like, I'll be there in a second. 5 years later, we're like, when's that coming? But if we stay faithful, He'll see it through. Paul said in Philippians chapter 1, says, the one who began a good work in you will finish it. So if He starts something in you, He will finish it. If you start out vacuuming the church floors, you might finish up being a pastor, or a worship leader, or a musician. Whatever you start out as is not the final destination. It's only the final destination if you look at yourself and you're like, well, I'm just an usher. I don't really belong here, so I'm just going to stay in this role because it's comfortable. That's when you'll be an usher until you die. But if you say, you know what, I'm going to start here, I'm going to love this, I'm going to do the work, I'm going to be faithful, I'm going to keep coming to church, I'm going to keep giving my tithes, I'm going to keep giving offerings, I'm going to keep serving, God's going to see that and bless that. If we live a life with open hands, we're going to be ready to receive what heaven pours down. But if we live our life with closed hands and closed hearts, we're never going to receive anything from God. You got people walking around with closed hands, closed hearts, closed minds, and closed ears, and they're wondering why they're not getting anything from God. Because you got to open up. Right? Sometimes you do have to open up your wallet. Sometimes you do have to open up your heart. Sometimes you do have to open up your mind. Sometimes you do have to go what you think is below you and go scrub a toilet. Sometimes you have to do those things. The Bible says, do it as you're doing it for God. Everything you do it for God. Whether it's a 9-to-5 job, volunteering, whatever it is, do it for God. But they say that those weaker ones are indispensable. Verse 23 says, and those parts of the body that we consider less honorable, we clothe with greater garments. And our unrespectable parts are treated with greater respect, which our respectable parts do not need. Instead, God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the less honorable. Jesus even taught about that. He said, if you want to be the greatest, be the least. You want to be first, be last. Humility is key. Putting other people's needs in front of your own is key. Loving others before you love yourself is key. Verse 26 says, if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. If one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. But that's where politics and church get mixed in. We say, I don't need you, even though we don't physically say it. Even though we don't say, I don't need you here, we don't need you here, our actions will speak louder than we ever said anything. It's how we treat them, how we look at them, how we talk to them. You can tear down somebody way quicker than you can build somebody else up, because in order to build somebody up, you've got to break through years of abuse, years of pain. You got to break through I don't know how many layers of walls because they've been hurt so much. But if you want to tear somebody down, all you got to do is look at them funny. It takes a lot of work to build somebody up, especially in the church. I think that is the hardest place to build somebody up, because they, for some reason, and I was there too, I could never understand, how can God love me? Like, if you can break down those walls, we'll go somewhere. How can God forgive me? If you can tear down that Jericho wall, I'll serve Him. This church hurt me, so you got to deal with that. There's more to church than what people think. But we don't say it, we show it, and it's usually in your most traditional and ultra-religious churches. That's where that happens. Where you don't dress like them, or talk like them, or act like them. You don't follow their standards. You don't belong. And I've been to those churches, and I knew I didn't belong. So I left. I knew they would never accept me for who I am and how I am unless I conformed to what they wanted me to be. But the Bible tells me in Romans 12, verse 2, do not be conformed to the patterns of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of my mind. So I don't need to conform to religious standards. I need to be transformed by His Word. And man has a really hard time and a really bad habit of twisting God's Word into what they want it to say. We look at this and they're judging people based on an outward appearance or based on what they've done, and they're so ultra-religious and so super spiritual in what they think they are, they're going exactly against what Jesus told them not to do in Matthew 7, where He says, don't judge. But that's where most people stop. They stop at 2 verses out of the whole Scripture, and you can't do that. Yeah, the Bible says don't judge, but it also says don't judge because the same measure that you used in judgment will be used against you. So without being blasphemous or anything, like, can I add to that? Instead of not only don't judge, but don't set an expectation on somebody that you're not meeting yourself. Don't set an expectation of spirituality on somebody coming in that you're not meeting yourself. Because you're no different than the Pharisees. Right? I don't know about you, I'm just a messed up dude trying to get all this right, and I'm figuring it out as I go. I still don't have it all. I don't even have life figured out. Much less Jesus, because I can't understand Him. Like, His ways aren't my ways. I can't get Him. But the more and the deeper that I go, I'm starting to understand His character. I'm starting to understand His passion, and I'm starting to understand who He is. I'm never going to fully get Him. Because just when I think I do, I find out something else. Just when I think I got God figured out, I fully understand Him, He hits me with something else. Like, well, now I got to figure that out. Where'd that come from? But they do this stuff, and they judge, and they set expectations. They go against what Jesus said. And the biggest problem is if they do judge, or if they do set these expectations, and they do have a problem with somebody, they go and tell everybody else in the church. Next thing you know, what was small, you're not a murderer or something, because it went down the grapevine. If it's went down the grapevine long enough, it is not the original story. It's going to change somewhere. But they go against Matthew 17 or Matthew 18 doing that. Because Jesus said, if you have a problem with somebody, go to them first. If that doesn't work, bring a witness. If that doesn't work, bring it before the church. If that doesn't work, split ways. But they skip all that and they go, did you hear about Brother Jimmy? Did you hear what he did? Next thing you know, Brother Jimmy's he's a murderer running from the cops because all he did was not shake somebody's hand. That's how the grapevine goes. Remember that game in school? You whisper something to one person and they try to make it all the way down the line. And if it was still the same thing, you win. That never worked. No one ever won. Big red fire truck turned into something in space. If you didn't see it and you didn't hear it, don't believe it. That's how you kill gossip. Right? But they will judge people on their past or on their backgrounds or their race, their personality, even now, their political affiliation. Now, you don't need to ask anybody, are you a Democrat or a Republican? That's like asking for a fight now. You don't ask if they're gay or if they're straight, which I really don't care what you are. You're a human. So I'm going to love you anyway. But they'll do all the exact same thing God put in the church for it to work. All the diversity, the exact same thing God put in place is the exact same thing that they're trying to get out in most churches. Like, we don't want to be diverse. We want to be white church, black church, Hispanic church. We want that. Well, no, we're the church. You're an arm, yeah, that's cool, but we should unite as one body. I mean, if we were one church, really, I don't know where it would be. How big the building would have to be. Parking would be a nightmare. It'd be like the mega churches if there was just one church. But God knew He couldn't get the needs of the people met by just meeting in one location, in one place. So He had to branch it out, right? So when He said, I'm going to start this thing called a church, and I'm going to put all these different members into this one body, I'm also going to put my Spirit in it. So even when they're not meeting in the location, wherever they go, my Spirit is with them. So wherever they go, they can have church. Because church is not just a building or a location. It's us. It's never up to me or you or a certain church to say who can come in, who can belong, and who can be a part. Because you never know, the one person that you might exclude might be that one part of the body that you really, really needed. You got people and you got churches praying for all these different positions to be filled, and then somebody walks in and they're like, oh, no, not you. That was the guy you needed. That was the woman you needed. Right? So if we're all the church and we all have God's Spirit, that means women and men, they all have roles, right? He didn't say, women, you're not part of this. And even the Bible was written in a really sexist time, but still, women have a part in the church. And it's more than just teaching Sunday school to kids. They can preach. They can teach. They can lead. They can sing. They can do small groups. They can do whatever we can do. Jesus said, whosoever will, let him come, right? Whosoever, I don't care if you have a past with them, you might have a future with them if you put your pride down long enough and reconcile for a little bit. Right? But pride's a hard thing for us to let go of. Verse 27 says, now you are the body of Christ. You are. Not the building, not the pastor, not the worship leader, not the usher. You. It says, you are the body of Christ and individual members of it. And God has appointed these in the church, first apostles, second prophets, third teachers, second miracle workers, gifts of healing, helping, administration, various kinds of tongues. Are all apostles, are all prophets, are all teachers? Does everybody do miracles? No. Is everybody going to speak in tongues? No. Is everybody going to prophesy? They might try. They might try. If they try, you better make sure you test it and it comes from God. I think that is one of the most abused gifts in the church is the gift of prophecy. The Lord told me, he said, the Lord didn't tell you to. You had an idea and you thought, hey, maybe if I tell him that God told me to tell him, he ought to run with it. No. If I had $1 for every prophecy that didn't come true about me, I'd be rich. The ones that have came true, I might have $1. And I'm not that ain't a lot. The false prophets outweigh the good prophets. The false people who speak in tongues outweigh the good ones. The false pastors outweigh the good pastors. There's a lot of negative, just like in the world, there's a lot of negative in the world, there's a lot of negative in the church, but that doesn't mean that we have to be a part of it. I think like there's a season coming to like, you know, like the wheats and the tares. The wind blows the wheat about. Tares just stand straight up. I think like God's like saying, all right, I'm going to blow a little bit, the wheat's going to bow down, and I'm going to expose the false ones. I think that's the season we're getting into coming up. Because God's tired of fake. I'm tired of fake. I'm tired of fake preaching. I'm tired of fake healing. I'm tired of TBN, to be honest. That's all it is. I mean, there might be 3. It's okay.
I don't watch it.
But they're on other channels too, so I can watch it somewhere else. He's like, give me some money and God will bless you. Like, did you miss the Simon the sorcerer part of the Bible where he tried to buy the Spirit of God and Peter was like, that don't work that way, man. You can't buy this power. You can't buy your healing. You can't buy your way into church. You can't buy your way into heaven. It doesn't work like that. The only way it works is if you humble yourself and come under the grace of God. It's the only way. Verse 31 says, but desire the greater gifts, and I will show you a better way. Every single person has a calling and a gift in their life from God. I don't care if they're 4, if they're 104. They have purpose, they have reason. I don't care if they're a man or a woman. I don't care what it is. They have purpose, they have reason. And God has gifted them for a part in the church. And it is up to the church to walk beside them and help them in their faith journey. Not tear them down and discourage them, but build them up. Because when I first started preaching, I was like, I'm probably not good at this. Probably ain't my calling. But people built me up and they encouraged and they kept me going. I was like, okay, maybe I am. I remember one time I was preaching and I got done and the guy was like, good job. I was like, oh, it wasn't me. It was all God. He was like, no, it wasn't. There was some of you in there. It wasn't that good. If that was all God, we'd all be on the floor. Take the compliment, man. We have to take our compliments, but don't let it go to our head. But once we realize that we're not working against each other, and we're actually working for each other, church would be a lot better place to go to. We see all the division in the church, and we see all the political stuff in the church, and we see all the fighting and the hypocrisy and all this stuff in church, and yet we have the gall to look at the world and be like, why ain't you coming in? You must hate God. No, we love God. We just don't want any part of that. Because I got that at home. I got fighting at home. I got hypocrisy at home. I've got all this other stuff. I don't want it in church. When I come to church, I want something different. I want to know when I come to church that I'm going to be accepted and I'm going to be loved. Some people, the only form of love that they've ever experienced throughout their life is church. Because they've been cast down and they've been thrown away by everybody else in their life. We should be the Good Samaritan picking them up and nursing them back to health, right? Remember that parable Jesus told? The priest walked right by him. The Christian walked right by him. But the one who shouldn't have had anything to do with him is the one who picked him up, took him to the hospital, paid for everything to get taken care of, and if he went over the budget, who's going to pay what was left over anyway? That's a representation of what Jesus did for us with salvation, with our sin. But that's what we should be doing as a church to the world. Because they're out there left for dead on the side of the road anyway in their sin, so why are we just walking by them? We should be picking them up and grafting them into this body. That's what we're all ultimately called to do. If you don't think you have a calling, go read Matthew 28 and Mark 16:15. Just go into all the world and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Great Commission is not a great suggestion. It is a command from God for believers everywhere. I don't care if you're a pastor or you clean the toilets. You're commissioned to spread the gospel and win souls. That is your calling as a core Christian, is to build this body up, because you can make sure the devil's building his up. You can make sure the devil's body, it's united. The devil's body, they got it all figured out. They got it all going on. But this one over here is like a jumbled up mess. And it's not God's fault. It's man's fault. Because we tend to mess things up. We did it before the flood. We did it after the flood. We even did it right on day whatever it was when Eve was like, here, try this. We messed it up. Because it's in our nature. The sin nature will always be at war with the spiritual nature. And depending on your intimacy with God, and intimacy with God is not sexual. Like, I don't know why pastors get that mixed up. Intimacy with God is not sexual. Intimacy, if you define it, it means you know the person, you connect with the person, there's a lot of different components there than just sex. You have to have intimacy with God. The deeper your relationship with God is, the further you're going to go, and the less your flesh or your sin nature is going to be able to control you and take you over. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. That's what Peter said. If you resist the devil has to flee. Churches need to start resisting the devil. They need to stop inviting them in the doors. The devil can't come to church. Oh yeah, he can. The devil can walk in. The devil will quote you scripture probably better than any preacher can. Because he quoted it to Jesus pretty quick. when he was tempting him in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, like, oh, if you're the Son of God, turn this bread or this stone into bread. Doesn't the Bible say, blah, blah, blah? No, Jesus is like, well, yeah, it does say that, but I asked. So the devil will always quote scripture or bring something godly to your mind and twist it to where it betters him. God will always bring scripture or something spiritual to your mind to help you and glorify him at the same time. It might not seem like it when you're going through it, because when you're going through it, you're like, well, what's up, God? But when you look back on it, that's where your worship starts. You want to know the difference between praise and worship? In church, praise is for victory. Worship is through the battle that you're going through right now. The harder the battle, the deeper the worship. The bigger the victory, the louder the shout. The louder the praise. You got people saying, praise the Lord, like, oh yeah, your life must be going pretty easy then, because you're not shouting all the time. What are you doing? Because I need to figure that out. Once we realize that we actually do belong, and we are a part of God, we'll fit into our roles, not just in life better, but in the church better. And once we start to fit in, we'll actually start to grow in it, and we'll actually start being the part that we're supposed to be. But don't be like the hand that says, because I'm not a foot, I don't belong here. Strengthen your hand. Strengthen your purpose, strengthen your gifts, strengthen your calling, because your calling is not mine and I can't walk out your calling. If I try to walk out your calling, I'm going to mess it up because it's not mine to carry. If you try to walk out mine, you're going to mess it up worse than I ever could because it's not yours. We try to carry stuff that's not ours, and then it fails, and we wonder, why did that mess up? Here's an example. This pulpit and the microphone, right? This pulpit knows it has to hold my Bible, it has to hold my notes. My microphone don't try to do that. Because it knows its purpose. And I know their purpose too. I'm not going to try to talk to this pulpit and expect you to hear every word I'm saying, right? Can you hear me? You didn't hear me, did you? Because that's not its purpose. That's because amplifying my voice is not the pulpit's purpose, it's this one. It's the microphone's purpose. If I try to speak into the pulpit, you're going to be like, is he done? You're not going to hear it. And then if I try to put my Bible on top of the microphone, it's just going to fall over. I know their purpose. They know their purpose because I told them what their purpose was. Right? God tells us our purpose. He gives us our calling, and He gives us our talents and our abilities, and we try to take those and we're like, well, I like that you gave me those, but I'm going to do it this way. And then we wonder why it's failing, or then we say, well, look at that guy, he can do that, or look at that woman, I bet I can do her calling better than she ever could. So we try to do it, and we fail, and we're like, well, God, why did I fail? Because it's not yours. Look at Jacob. He had a rough life because he stole blessings and he stole birthrights, and he was on the run his whole life. He had a rough life. He even wrestled with God and wound up limping the rest of his life because he was so stubborn. He was going to wrestle with God too. Not just spiritually, but physically. Don't be that stubborn. Don't be the very same people who stoned Stephen. Don't get so caught up in tradition and religion and systematic ways of doing things that we lose sight of why we're really here. I think that's the biggest problem with the biggest problem churches have, is they forget who they are. Throughout the years, it's easy to forget your identity and who you are and why you're there and all that. It's easy to forget that stuff. Sometimes you need to go back and remember, this is our purpose. We're here for people. Sometimes you need to have a revision, not just in your life, but in the church. So you remember who you are and why you're here. And your part in it.